The arrival of the BMW 1500 in 1961 marked the start of a new era for the Bavarian carmaker. Classic car expert Christoph Bauer takes us on a trip back in time. He says that BMW was in crisis in the early 1950s and was even in danger of being taken over by arch-rival Mercedes. That's because, apart from motorbikes, BMW produced just two kinds of vehicles: small cars and luxury sedans, or, as Der Spiegel magazine put it, cars for laborers and CEOs. So the 1500 was aimed at the middle classes. It was the first of what became known as BMW's New Class. To make the new class palatable to the middle classes, BMW used just the right ingredients. To make it practical, the 1500 had 4 doors. Its 4-cylinder engine was thrifty but still delivered 80 horsepower. And at a price of 8,500 Deutschmarks, it made many a family man's mouth water. Christoph says the BMW 1500 made its debut at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 1961. It thrilled the crowds, and around 2,000 orders were taken then and there. But BMW took its time putting the model into series production. When the Association of the Automotive Industry threatened to penalize BMW, it took 35 pre-production models, put them on the assembly line for another model, and got some mechanics to look like they were tinkering around with the car. Then they said, "Look, Mr. Inspector, we're building it." And it worked. Which was a good thing, as with the new class, BMW was one of the first European car makers to venture into new automotive terrain. The modern 4-cylinder engine used in the 1500 would be fitted into other BMW models for the next 25 years. The 1500 came to define what BMW stood for as a brand. Christoph says the car looks small and refined from the outside, but inside it's quite spacious, which was by no means a given for a car of its class in the 1960s. But Christoph says it's a matter of geometry. Experts know that a cube boasts more volume than a sphere with the same surface area, and BMW's head designer Wilhelm Hofmeister used this to his advantage. He defined the basic features of BMW's design language, including the famous Hofmeister kink the firm still uses today. The characteristic kidney radiator grille was the only homage to BMW's glorious past. Otherwise, the 1500 broke with tradition completely. The car's delicate and almost rectangular roof lets in plenty of light. The sharp angles and side seams were a novelty at the time, but continue to add verve to automotive design to this day. The foam upholstery in the middle of the steering wheel was an early concession to passive safety, just like the sunken instruments, which don't reflect in the windshield. The new class offered drivers and passengers lots of room in a relatively small space. And Christoph says the 1500's 4-cylinder power plant is the stuff of legend. It has a cast-iron engine block with an aluminum cylinder head, an overhead camshaft, and a forged crankshaft. Its engineering wrote automotive history. In the 1980s, some BMW design engineers took a couple of these engines with a service life of over 100,000 kilometers, fitted them with a turbocharger, and sent them onto the Formula One circuits of this world, with as much as 1,300 horsepower under the hood. It sounds absurd, but it was enough to win the 1983 Formula One World Championships. This modest-looking engine ranks among the most legendary in the history of motorsport. Never in his wildest dreams could developer Alexander von Falkenhausen have imagined that his innovation would end up writing Formula One history. With the help of the M10 engine, Nelson Piquet took the 1983 Drivers' Championship. His Brabham BMW is still considered to be one of the most powerful ever seen in Formula One. The 4-speed transmission shifts crisply and the suspension is well tuned. In the early 60s, the BMW 1500 even gave Porsches a run for their money. Christoph says it might not sound like much today, but at the time, eking 80 horsepower out of 4 cylinders was like declaring war on the competition. Porsche's base model 356 had just 60 horsepower. The 1500 was called a sprinter in a tux, and Christoph thinks that's an apt description. He says this 1.5-liter engine is very responsive, but at 4,500 RPMs, it's pretty loud and sounds a little labored. But BMW already had improvements in the works. Later new class models, like the BMW 2000 Ti with up to 2 liters of cubic capacity and 130 horsepower, helped drivers such as Hubert Hahne write touring car history. BMW produced the model range for a decade, selling over 360,000 vehicles. Christoph says there's no question that as the first mid-size BMW of the post-war era, the new class wrote automotive history and almost single-handedly saved the company from bankruptcy. Even today, folks at BMW are proud of this car's most important feature, how fun it is to drive. So Christoph says the BMW 1500 is definitely a milestone in automotive history. You could say that the BMW 1500 filled a gap left by the Borgward Isabella. Its modern design was inspired by the American Chevrolet Corvair and numerous Italian models. But in its day, the BMW 1500 was pretty much in a class all its own.